A particularly dark moment for the Soviet Union was the siege of Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. German forces surrounded Leningrad before civilians could be evacuated. Supplies, including food, were cut off for 2.5 years.
Damn, 2.5 years?
1.5 million people died as a result, mostly from starvation, mostly civilians.
What's going on, people? It's your boy Tone, back with another video. Today, we have the falling of World War II. A few of my subscribers have been requesting this, so here we are. So without further ado, let's get into this video, man. Come on.
The average lifespan of an American is 80 years. And an 80-year-old today was 10 when World War II ended, 4 when it began. A soldier who saw battle would have to be in his late 80s, at least today. Generals, political leaders, the decision makers of the war, few are still with us. And over the past few decades, we've seen authors and filmmakers rush to capture stories from survivors before this connection of memory is lost. This project is not about individual war stories, and it's not about survivors. We're going to tally up the tens of millions of people whose lives were cut short by the war, and see how these numbers stack up to other wars in history, including trends in recent conflicts. We'll be counting soldiers and civilians separately. Each of these figures represents 1,000 people who died. Civilians were of all walks of life, whereas military deaths were almost entirely men. The average age was about 23. In most battles, for every 1,000 soldiers killed, there are more than 1,000 who were injured. The word casualty can be confusing because in military speak, it often includes both deaths and injuries, and anything else that takes a soldier out of service. Here, we're just counting the deaths, and we'll begin with American soldiers. Over 400,000 died.
Almost 500,000.
Most of the deaths occurred in the European theater, fighting the Nazis. And about a quarter were in the Pacific, fighting the Japanese. When you put them on the timeline, you see that casualties were the heaviest at the end of the war. The war began on September 1st, 1939. But the US wasn't willing to join the fight until Pearl Harbor, 2 years in.
This is going to be good. I'm liking the illustration so far. It makes it very easy to follow and easy to understand, man. This is fire, though. So far, so good. Shout out to the subscriber who wanted me to watch this video. Let's go.
Deaths increased drastically on D-Day, when the Allies invaded Normandy. One of the most tragic moments of the war was on D-Day at Omaha Beach, where 2,500 Americans fell.
And like I said before, I believe that was the Saving Private Ryan introduction, that whole scene. I believe that was that same situation. And that from that movie, that introduction, how people were just getting shot like that, that was crazy, bro. Before they even get on the ground, we get hit off the boats. Hundreds of people dying in the ocean, sinking down to the bottom. That jump was crazy. Let's keep it going.
So about the same number of US soldiers died on this single beach landing as the entire 13 years of the recent war in Afghanistan. The bloodiest battle in the Pacific was Okinawa, which lasted 82 days, during which 12,500 Americans died.
12,500.
About 5,000 of these deaths were at sea from kamikaze attacks. Now let's look at some other countries, starting with Europe. Germany started World War II when it invaded Poland. Poland ultimately lost 200,000 soldiers in the war. Most died after the invasion while the country was occupied by Germany and the Soviet Union. Germany, meanwhile, lost just 16,000 in the invasion of Poland. The Nazis went on to invade and conquer other countries, including Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, France, Greece, and Yugoslavia. France surrendered, but after losing 92,000 soldiers in the Battle of France. Over 200,000 ultimately fell, which includes deaths in POW camps, French colonies, and other fighting.
Wow.
Yugoslavia suffered.
So even right there, even after they surrendered, Germans were still killing the soldiers. After they put the white flag up and said, all right, y'all got it, Germany was like, nah, we don't even care about that. We still gonna kill y'all. That just tells you what kind of level they were on, as far as they didn't care about nobody. They didn't care about the human people, bro. They didn't care about that shit, bro. That was crazy. How you gonna surrender and you still killing the soldiers after the surrender? Let's keep it going.
In POW camps, French colonies, and other fighting. Yugoslavia suffered almost 500,000 military deaths.
What?
The initial invasion brought relatively few casualties on both sides. But the deaths mounted under Nazi occupation due to guerrilla fighting, civil conflict, and mass executions. The Nazi invasions were swift.
You know what that shows me, though? That shows me, if you know what I'm saying, that shows me that surrendering don't really, it ain't really. You might as well give it all you got, man. You might as well go all out. Because if somebody is willing to invade your country and take out everything you stand for, you think they're gonna stop when you quit, when you surrender? Based off these stats, man, they're gonna keep going. They're gonna keep going until they get what they want in your country the way they wanted it to be ran. This is crazy, bro. Come on.
The Nazi invasions were swift, with relatively few German losses. Even the Nazi commanders expressed surprise at their success.
That's crazy.
And then we have the United Kingdom and the United States, who were not invaded but took the fight to the Nazis. Britain lost about the same number of soldiers as the US, which includes the British colonies. Germany lost about 500,000 soldiers fighting the US and Britain in what is known as the Western Front, which took place in France and Belgium.
And that part right here, this goes to show you how important it was for the UK and the US to come in and help, bro. That just goes to show Germany was on a run. Germany was going hard. Germany was going crazy. Everywhere they went, they were winning. And if we didn't interfere when we did, there's no telling what the world would be like today. There's no telling. If we would have waited too long and Germany would have got too strong as far as, you know, just military strength, and if we waited too long, there's no telling where we would have been today. No telling. No telling. Now we finally stepped in. Look at the numbers.
Which took place in France and Belgium. But most Nazi soldiers died in the Eastern Front. Germany's unsuccessful invasion of the Soviet Union.
Russia pulled up.
The numbers are staggering.
Holy shit.
The most famous battle of the Eastern Front, and perhaps the turning point of the European war, was Stalingrad. The German Sixth Army successfully took Stalingrad, but then got surrounded by the Soviets and cut off from food and ammunition. 500,000 Nazis would ultimately die in Stalingrad. Another 100,000 were taken prisoner, of which 6,000 would ever return. POWs had a low survival rate throughout World War II, and it was particularly grim in the East. When you include these POWs, roughly the same number of Germans died in Stalingrad as all the Western Front fighting against France, the UK, and the US.
What was it, Stalingrad? Stalingrad was like that? Soviet Union, Russia pulled up? Stalingrad was like, I'm going to have to look into that. That's interesting. That's interesting.
And though Stalingrad was a victory for the Soviets, they suffered almost twice as many losses as Germany.
Look at all those people, bro.
The Soviet Union would eventually defeat the once unstoppable German army, killing 2.3 million Nazi soldiers.
Man, 2.3
But winning the war
million
came at a cost.
a loss of life for power, greed, territory, land, minerals. Such a loss of life. Such a disregard of life, of the human life, to throw it away like that because one person wants to come and run everything and dominate everything. All these people, all these soldiers had to put their life on the line for what? For one person, bro. For one person trying to take over the world. All these men died, bro. Man, look at that. Bro. I didn't know it was like that, to be honest. I didn't know it was like that, to be honest. I didn't know they sacrificed that many people. Or not sacrificed, but put forward that many soldiers.
8.7 million is the official tally by the Russian military, a hotly disputed number.
Man.
Some studies have calculated as many as 14 million dead. To complete the count of European military deaths, we need to add German deaths from other fronts, including the North and Africa, as well as deaths from other Axis powers allied with the Nazis, Hungary, Romania, and Italy. When you put these European military deaths on the timeline, it looks like this. You can now interact with the chart to learn more. Pause the narration if you would like more time. And now we switch to civilian deaths in Europe.
But before we go even there, I didn't know that. I didn't know Russia put that many soldiers up. You know what I mean? I didn't know that many soldiers died from Russia. Because, like, we were taught America, America, America. You know what I'm saying? Even though everybody played their part, bro, Russia sacrificed a lot, dog.
Six million Jewish people were killed in the Holocaust.
Man.
If you separate this by country, you see that about half, 2.7 million, were Polish. 700,000 were Soviets, followed by Hungary and 17 other countries. Broken down another way, about half of the 6 million were killed in the concentration camps. Over 1 million died in Auschwitz. Most were killed in the gas chambers. Others died from starvation, exhaustion, disease, and other forms of execution.
And y'all let me know, cause from what I remember, it's been a long time since we've been in history class, but I think it was the trains, right? Weren't they put on the trains, and during the train ride, that's where they were getting introduced to the chemicals, the gas chambers kind of thing. Y'all let me know. All right, been a long time. Let's keep it going.
The second most deadly camp was Treblinka, which was exclusively an extermination camp, set up to look like a train station.
Boom.
Mobile killing groups killed 1.4 million Jews. Like with the gas chambers, men were killed first to reduce the risk of revolt.
That's crazy. And I think there's a movie, one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's like one of my top 3 favorite movies of all time. It's called The Pianist. And I believe there's a scene where his family's getting placed on a train, and one of the generals, one of his own race, the generals kind of saved them. Like, what are you doing here? All right, like, get out of line, go run, get out of here. Don't get on this train. And he was kind of like, why? It's my family. And you gotta watch the movie though. If you haven't seen Pianist, please go watch that movie right now. It tells just one perspective of how Jews were being treated, man. Worked to death. I'm talking about back breaking work, freezing temperatures. Crazy. Let's keep it going.
The Holocaust also includes non-Jewish deaths. Between 130,000 to 500,000 Roma, then called Gypsies, were killed. The numbers are disputed. About 250,000 people with disabilities were killed. Homosexuals, Catholics, and other groups were also exterminated, but their numbers were relatively small. Some historians say that other civilian deaths should go under the label of...
Is Roma, is that Romani, or is that two different countries? Romani and Roma. I'm not sure. Let me know down below.
About 2 million non-Jewish Poles were killed under German occupation. Some of which were sent to the gas chambers at Auschwitz. When you combine civilian and military deaths, over 16% of the total Polish population died in World War II, which is the highest percentage of any country.
16%.
But not the highest in total death count. The Soviet Union again tops that list, losing at least as many civilians as it did soldiers, somewhere between 10 and 20 million. A particularly dark moment for the Soviet Union was the siege of Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. German forces surrounded Leningrad before civilians could be evacuated. Supplies, including food, were cut off for 2.5 years.
Damn, 2.5 years?
1.5 million people died as a result, mostly from starvation, mostly civilians. Stalin's cruelty towards his own people is partly responsible for these numbers.
What?
He often didn't allow civilians to evacuate from cities, thinking it would cause the soldiers protecting them to fight harder. About 1 million Soviets died in Stalin's own labor camps, called the Gulag.
Is that where that came from?
Just about every country suffered civilian losses, especially countries who were invaded. While many died as a result of so-called collateral damage, the biggest numbers occurred when it was no accident. Civilians were exterminated, purposely fired upon or bombed, used as human shields, or intentionally deprived of food. The intentional killing of civilians was done by most warring parties, including the United Kingdom and the United States. The United Kingdom was spared of a land invasion, but still lost 60,000 civilians, largely from German air raids or blitzes, often directed at civilian population centers. The UK did the same to German cities at a much greater magnitude, causing about 10 times the number of deaths. But most German civilian deaths came from the ground at the late stage of the war. When the Nazi regime collapsed, civilians living in occupied regions had to desperately flee from the advancing Soviet army. Rapes were widespread, and death estimates ranged from 600,000 to 3 million.
I like how he's dropping bombs. He's dropping some crazy information, some crazy statistics, right? But he's giving you time to process the information, because these are heavy bombs, y'all. These are crazy stats. And if you notice, there's always a pause right after he gives you the stat for you to just digest the information he's giving you, bro. You need it, bro. Let's keep it going.
Back and see where we are with the totals. We just counted about 20 million civilian deaths in Europe. If you add this to the European military deaths we already covered, it brings us to over 40 million. Then we have the Asian theater. Here we see the vast majority of military deaths in Asia came from China and Japan. On the civilian side, about 6 million deaths from China, Indonesia, Korea, Indochina, and the Philippines can be attributed to Japanese war crimes, which are sometimes compared to the Nazi atrocities due to the sheer scale of the cruelty.
But I know the other video we watched was saying something about a camp. I know one of you guys commented down below too. It said something about the 741 camp. Something like that. We're gonna look into that too. You guys let me know, comment down below about that too. We're gonna do a video on that for sure. Let's get back into it.
China had the second highest death count after the Soviet Union. And like the Soviets, the Chinese government demonstrated a stunning willingness to sacrifice its own people. Chinese nationalists opened the dike at the Yellow River, hoping the flood would halt the Japanese advance. 500,000 Chinese civilians or more were killed, which is 2 or 3 times the number who died in all countries in the 2004 Asian tsunamis. But the invasion of China only cost Japan 200,000 soldiers. Most were killed fighting the US and allies in the Pacific War.
Pearl Harbor.
A significant portion of Japanese civilian deaths were caused by American firebombing and the 2 nuclear attacks. Contrary to official US statements, these airstrikes were directed at civilian populations, not military targets.
And that's what I was saying on the last video. And I know one of you guys made a comment like it was absolutely necessary to do. Um and that's, I don't know about that, man. I mean, I think it accelerated the ending, it accelerated the surrender, it accelerated the finish. But to target those nukes at a civilian population, that's, I mean, that's just the thing, though, right? War is war. There is no rules in war. So there is no evil is evil. You know what I'm saying? Fighting for your country is fighting for your country. It all gets mixed together, bro. But dang, bro. Let me know what you guys think down below, man. Was the nuclear attacks needed or necessary or warranted, or should we have gone another way with that? Let me know what you guys think down below. Come on.
When you add all the deaths outside of Europe, it brings us to a grand total of 70 million for the war, give or take depending on who's counting and what civilian deaths get included. More people died in World War II than in any other war in history. For comparison, here are 20 or so of the very worst wars and atrocities we have on record. Some of these are more of atrocities than wars, but we've seen how that distinction can get blurry. Some of these spanned across centuries. World War II had the highest body count, and it all happened in just 6 years.
Yeah, I thought it was 10. But it was 6
The world's
years.
population has grown significantly since the earliest atrocities on this list. If you want to compare them in terms of what percentage of the world died, we can adjust the chart to look like this. This rough approximation tells us there may have been more devastating wars before World War II, proportionally speaking.
Right. Man.
When we turn to post-war conflicts, it's hard to say anything that isn't controversial. But the data shows something quite extraordinary has been happening. In 1989, John Gaddis coined the phrase the long peace to identify the absence of conflict between the nuclear powers during the Cold War.
Right.
25 years later, the Cold War is over, and the term is still being used, although its meaning may have shifted. European countries have not fought each other, except for this 10-day war in 1956 when the Soviet Union invaded Hungary. When we look at European wars before World War II, it looks like this. They tend to be more frequent as you go back, though smaller in scale. And the largest 44 economies of the world have not battled each other since World War II. Rich countries have fought poorer countries, like the US versus Iraq, but rich countries have not fought other rich countries. Such a period of peace between the so-called great powers hasn't been seen since the Roman Empire.
That's an interesting stat.
To many, peace is too strong of a word. Wars have occurred since World War II, and they can be grouped into these 4 categories. We don't see colonial wars anymore. We've already noted that interstate wars between rich countries have not occurred at all, and here we see wars involving smaller economies have tapered off. That leaves civil wars of 2 types, with and without foreign intervention. And this is what these battle deaths look like alongside of World War II. More people died fighting in World War II than in all the wars since. And again, we can't forget about world population, which has almost tripled since World War II. If we scale these numbers to show deaths in proportion to world population, showing the likelihood that a person on Earth dies in battle, the downward trend becomes even more pronounced. Now, this isn't to infer anything about why this trend is occurring. That's a discussion for another day. Peace is a difficult thing to measure. It's a bit like counting the people who didn't die in wars that never happened. We give such importance to the word peace, but we don't tend to notice it when it occurs or report on it. Sometimes it takes reminding ourselves of how terrible war once was to see the peace that has been growing around us. Of course, this trend may not continue, and it's not clear how looking at these charts can help us make the right decisions to ensure that it does.
And I also kind of wonder if they've tied in the Ukraine war with Russia that's going on right now. You know what I mean? We're getting fed a lot of like information from both sides. But initially it was kind of like, all right, Russia's the bad people, you know what I'm saying, for going over here and doing these things. But I've also heard from the other side, like, if Ukraine becomes a democracy or something like that, and that keeps spreading, that in the future can become a threat to Russia, something like that. But I think that story, I think that war is a lot deeper than what we think it is on the base level. I think there's a lot more going on there we don't know about. That's not being said, but also very interesting. If you guys know anything, let me know. Let's keep it going.
But the longer the long peace grows, the more significant it becomes. So if watching the news doesn't make us feel hopeful about where things are heading, watching the numbers might.
So what I'm getting from this was just showing you how impactful World War II was and how many more soldiers, you know, were taken away from us during this war. Now, I will say on that we can't afford to have another war against, I guess, how he would consider a rich country versus a rich country, us versus Russia, and that's why I kind of think that Biden is kind of hesitant and just jumping in that war with Ukraine, because if there is a World War III, you know, God forbid, whatever, technology has advanced too far for us to go back into a full-fledged war, man. And it's just not. It just would be so detrimental on both sides. For any huge country or any small country, you know what I'm saying, at that as well, to go back into a full-fledged war, man. You know, so you got people on both sides, you know, saying he should have went in there and, you know, shut down Russia. And you got folks saying, nah, he should just fall back and let Ukraine, you know, assist from a distance. You know what I mean? Send support, send help, but don't directly put troops on the ground. Because World War II was a history lesson, man. The lack of importance that they put on the human life was just disgusting, right? Sacrificing millions of people because two people disagree with each other, or one person wants to run everything, is just a slight to the human race. We're more intelligent than that. And of course, there are deeper rooted issues there, right? Whether it be one country is running out of a mineral or a substance, and their people are starving, but you're over here rich, and we've been asking for help for the last 20 years. No one's helping, so it is what it is. So there's always deeper issues to these back and forths. But as always, man, I definitely believe that the world can't take another war based off what I said earlier, man. Technology is too far advanced. Everybody has nukes, and it's just not worth the sacrifice of the human race, because we can't get along down here based off we're different, whether it be race-wise, country-wise, culturally-wise, or any of that stuff, man. We got to get to a point where we start looking at what we have in common, which is 99% of us are, you know, almost damn near exactly the same, genetically wise, versus what we don't have in common, and hating the man next to us because they're different in some type of way. So, listen, man, I believe in us, man. I believe in us. We're just getting started. We got a ways to go. You know what I'm saying? We got a ways to go, and we're just getting started, y'all. So this was a good video, man. Shout out to the subscribers who requested this one. And thank you guys for watching. If you're here watching me now, thanks for watching to the end. I appreciate you guys. And until next time, y'all be safe out there. Peace.
If I should die at a young age, I thank the Lord for giving me a break. If I should die at a young age, I thank the Lord for giving me a break. 'Cause I'll probably live forever, ever, probably live